Hello?
Hey, good morning, Mr. Rucker.
How you doing, buddy?
Hey, we're gonna start off. First, I just want to thank you for your time today. Thank you for letting me do this.
Sure.
And we're gonna start off. I just want you to introduce yourself, give your background story, where you went to school, your path to the draft, and your path to making the NFL team.
Okay. Are you taking this or are you writing it down?
I'm taping this.
Okay. Gotcha. Um, I grew up in St. Joe, Missouri, small town outside of Kansas City, Missouri. And, the funny thing is that, I started playing football when I was about 8 years old. And my uncle was the first one to, go to college on a football scholarship. And I remember being 8 years old and going to his games in Graceland, Iowa. And just right then, I knew that this is what I wanted to do. And, I always tell people when I speak to them, they're like, why did you pick football? And I say, well, this is the only sport I get to hit someone and I don't get in trouble for it.
Yes, sir.
So that's, I instantly started, falling in love with football about 8 years old. And as I grew up and I was playing sports, one of the couple of the highlights, good and bad. One of them was early on when I was about 10 years old, and I was the biggest and the fastest on the field, and my grades were just probably average, maybe just dipping below average, and my mom and dad, I remember them pulling me for football, saying, "You're not playing unless your grades come up." And, I had thought that initially, because I was so good, and I knew my dream of playing in the NFL, that, that they were bluffing, and they didn't. And they yanked me from football, and it was for a long time. And so that really grabbed my attention and early on. And so I ended up getting my grades back and get back on the football field. As I progressed in playing ball, my only dream was to play at the University of Missouri. And as I got into high school, I was my sophomore year. We played this team called Webb City, and they had this guy that was ranked in the country, top in the country. He played defensive end, tight end, same position as I played.
Uh huh.
And so we went against each other my sophomore year, and I did well against him. And he was being recruited. He was being recruited by Nebraska, and so as they were recruiting him, they saw me, and then they started to look at me. And as we move forward, my senior year, we play each other again down in Webb City, and Nebraska's been calling, and they offered us both scholarships. And so I was kind of torn because I've always wanted to go to Missouri, even though they were really, really bad. The most games they probably won were 3 or 4 games, but I was very loyal and I wanted to stay in the state of Missouri. But the problem was they didn't recruit me. And Nebraska was calling me every week, and they were actually, this is 1993, they were playing in the national championship game against Florida State and Charlie Ward and those guys. And I said, I'd be crazy not to go to Nebraska, and with all the attention that they were getting. So I remember Coach Osborne coming to the house and us talking and, basically making my mind that I was going to the University of Nebraska. The good thing was it was only 2 hours away, which was closer than going to Missouri, which was 3. And so I signed my letter of intent to go to Nebraska, play under Coach Osborne.
Mm-hmm.
I redshirted my first year. That was kind of tough mentally because the guy that I played against, Grant Windstrom, we had the same height, same ability, but his coaching techniques are a little bit more advanced from his high school, which allowed him not to redshirt. So mentally, that was hard for me because here's a guy that's getting to play, and I got a redshirt. I was really, the Lord really just blessed me in the sense of, knowing when it was my time and when I needed to sit and when I needed to play. Because that redshirt year allowed me to enjoy, college life, but it also allowed me to grow physically and mentally. And so I took advantage of that. And so as we started, going through our career, that first year we played, 1994, we played in the national championship game against Miami. and that's with Warren Sapp, Ray Lewis. They had the Rock was on that team, and they were really stout. That early '90s, all the Florida teams were really good, and we ended up beating them down in Miami for in one of our first national championships. And then in '95, we come back, I'm getting some playing time. We played for a national championship again against Florida, Danny Werfel and Steve Spurrier, and we ended up beating them pretty good. And then we came back my third year in '96. We lost the game early on to Arizona State, but found a way to claw back. And I think we were ranked like number 2 in the country. And we played, this was the first year of the Big 12, and we played Texas and ended up losing to Texas on a 4th and 1. That dashed our national championship hopes. But then we came back in '97, and was starting by then, and played a national championship game again against Tennessee and Peyton Manning. And they had, they had a lot of good guys on that squad, and we ended up beating them. And then my senior year, Coach Osborne retired, and we ended up getting a new coach, and we lost a few games there. But again, everything that I was doing was trying to position myself to play in the National Football League.
Yes, sir.
And that was really all I could see. That's all I could smell. That's all I could focus on was getting to the National Football League. I sometimes it's frustrating because I think that everybody's like that in their goals, and it's not. And that's something that I've had to learn. But ever since I can remember, I was so locked in on doing one thing and one thing only, which can be good but can be bad, because if that one thing doesn't work, then I have no backup plan. But if it does work, then I was determined. So it was kind of a calculated gamble. But the one thing that I want to make sure people know is that, I graduated from college. And the reason being is that that's something that can't be taken away from me. Football is going to be taken away at some point in time, whether it's PE, high school, college, or pros. Eventually, it's going to be taken away from me. And I knew that my college degree could not be taken away, and so I was able to get my degree.
Thank you. Can you describe your path to the draft?
So, path to the draft. So, it's actually an ironic one. My senior year, each year I got better and better in college. And my senior year was supposed to be that blowout year. I was getting some national attention. This was going to be the year where I just blow the stage up. And as a defensive end, the way that you get paid and get drafted are by sacks. That's it. They don't care how many interceptions or tackles. If you got a great amount of sacks, that's where you're going to get drafted. And my senior year, we were going into our first home game playing La Tech. They had a guy by the name of Tim Rattay, and he was a quarterback, and they had a receiver that was really good. And they tried this trick play, and they had a guy in the shotgun, the receiver in the shotgun, and I was trying to tackle him, and as the ball went over his head, and I felt this pain go down my leg, and my groin area was just on fire, and all the way down my leg. And I've had a lot of injuries, but never had an injury like this before. And I remember laying on my back in front of 75,000 people screaming, and the place just goes silent. I just remember laying on my back, and I was just like, Lord, no, please don't, not now. Because I knew this was pretty bad. And I remember getting me in the locker room, and they didn't really know what was going on, and so they just got me in a cold tank. And I remember it took a couple of weeks, but they found a specialist. And this injury that I had was called pubis, and it was really career-ending at this point in time. People that had it really never came back, and if they did, they weren't really worth anything. And you couldn't walk. I mean, it just shot pain all over your body. And we ended up going out and playing Cal out in California, and we found this doctor out there. And we hooked up with her and got some rehab things in place, and we started working and rehabbing, and it started getting better. But, the Lord just really woke me up and was just like, look, you gotta you got to do some different things in your life. And so that was kind of my wake-up call, spiritually and mentally and physically, in my walk in my life, especially with my faith. That was a pivotal moment, and because I had to trust in the Lord that regardless if I played football or not, that I was going to be okay. And so I basically rededicated my life and my faith, and as I go through the season, I get no sacks, none, not a zilch, maybe a handful of tackles. I mean, really, when you look at the stats, my senior season was just a disaster. Well, because I was diligent, and I think the Lord just really blessed me, is that going into the last game of the year, I'm playing Colorado after the day after Thanksgiving. So everybody in the country is watching. And make a long story short, I had 2 sacks in that game, and I was the MVP of the game. And then we went and played in our bowl game, the Holiday Bowl, against Arizona. I had 2 sacks, and I was the MVP of the game. And then I went to the Senior Bowl, and down in Alabama, it's the All-Star game, had 2 sacks, and I was the MVP of the game. And so those 3 games took 3 games and 6 sacks, 3 MVPs, and I was fortunate enough to be drafted number 38 overall in the 1999 draft to the Carolina Panthers. So it was something that was so close to not happening, but it did, and very thankful for it.
All right. Thank you for that. The base of my paper is about NFL athletes and their struggles with money. So I just want to ask you a few questions about that.
Sure.
Did you have any financial experience prior to NFL, such as writing checks or saving money or paying bills and taxes?
You know, I grew up in a blue-collar home. My dad was a union guy, hardworking. He was a mechanic, and basically he didn't want my mom to work, so he worked overtime. He worked the graveyard shift. He wanted something different from his upbringing. So my mom was at home with us when we came home from school and to going to school, but Dad had to work extra hours just to make up for Mom not working. And so we weren't poor, but we weren't rich. We found a way to make it. So money was never like plentiful around our household. So when I did little odd jobs, mowing grass, stuff like that, but just simple cash. When I got to college, we had a scholarship check, and so I just had a debit card. That was it. In my mind, I felt like I didn't want a credit card because if I didn't have the money, I didn't want to spend it. And so I felt like whatever little money I had, and I used my debit card, and the debit card wouldn't work if you didn't have that amount of money in it. And so really, that was the only experience that I had dealing with money. And the funny thing about it is that when I was drafted and I bought my first house, I didn't have any credit. So that was kind of ironic, where a lot of times people can't buy houses because they have bad credit. Well, here I was, I couldn't buy a house because I didn't have any credit. And so that was kind of weird. So we had to build my credit up so I could even buy my first house.
Yes, sir. Did the NFL or the Players Association help you with this?
Not at that time. The both sides have come a long way since I was drafted, as far as having different programs and different resources. Like, we did have a rookie symposium that was like in its second year, where they brought guys to talk about different things that were going on financially, mentally, families and stuff like that. But it was really quick. It was like a 2-day thing. Where now they back that up at the team level. They do more things. The whole draft class does a symposium, and so they do things throughout the year that I think help reinforce, what the subject matters are versus just saying it one time a year. Kind of back when I was around, it's just one time a year, and now they do it multiple times a year, trying to reinforce the importance of these different subjects.
And I want you to explain your first experience when you got your first big contract or you got your first paycheck after a game.
Yeah, it was when you're dealing with that kind of amount of money and you get paid within a 16-week window. That means the checks are going to be really big, and so, but the problem is that even though you get 16 checks in a big, you got to spread those checks out amongst the rest of the year because you don't really get paid the rest of the year. So there's that's one of the pitfalls because you see this check that might be, $50,000, and really you've got to spread that check out over the course of a year. Those $50,000 checks. So it can be a pitfall because you're like, oh, I got $50,000 this week. Well, if you spend that all up this week for 16 weeks, well, what are you going to do for the rest of the year? So it was a big number, and it was eye-opening, especially coming from a guy that was just living on a scholarship check. It was eye-opening, but it was pretty neat.
Did your spending habits change, or were you consistent?
I was pretty consistent for a number of years. I was dating a girl my junior year, and she came with me. She's my wife now. But at the time, we were still dating, and our habits were pretty much the same. We brought our college car down. I worked out a deal with the local dealership back home, so we really didn't have a car payment. We rented an apartment for 6 months when we first got here. So all we did had a rent payment, and then when we bought our house, all we really had was a house payment. So we kept things pretty lean and mean. So at least for the first 3-4 years. So things didn't change that much in that aspect. Didn't go out and buy any crazy car, any fancy house. It was just really just middle of the road.
All right, thank you. And over that time, did you have a financial advisor? And if you did, was he helpful or was he more just for the ride?
Yeah, so this is a great question, and this is something I've looked at for a long time. And this is kind of what I've come up with. When you talk about agents and financial advisors, it's really tough to really know if you've got a good one, if he's really for you. And my experience was, this happens a lot throughout the college realm when someone's going to the NFL. If I am, say, a sophomore and you're a junior, and let's say you have someone that's a senior, and we all know each other because we play on the same squad. And the guy that's a senior, let's just say his name's John, and John doesn't have maybe the expertise, or he doesn't have the people around him to help him make good decisions. And let's just say that this guy comes to him and is selling him everything, telling him what he can get him drafted, and giving him money and these different things. And so John goes with him, signs with him, and the financial advisor tells him he's going to make him a ton of money, and so he signs with him. And these people aren't good. And so next year when you're around, you're a senior, you're going to say, John, man, I'm going through the same process, man. How'd you do this? And John's going to be like, I got some guys for you, check them out. And so then all of a sudden you sign with these guys. And the same thing happens with me. And so it's just kind of a snowball. It's a snowball effect. It can happen if the guys are good, but it can happen if the guys are bad. And since you have the money, everybody else has the ideas. And so if you have a bad apple and a financial advisor, and you're getting these big checks, a lot of times you really don't know if this guy is good until the economy goes bad. And so this is the same way that I started off. I had some guys that were older than me, good guys, come from very affluent backgrounds and from where they were from. And so I felt like, okay, I could trust these guys and the guys that they picked. And we had the same financial advisor. Now, the advisor didn't do anything illegal, anything like that, but he never educated us. He never educated me. Let me say that. He never educated me. And so I think that should be part of the process, is that anybody that's in your life should be educating you on what they're doing for you. And that wasn't happening. And this was during the tech bubble in the early 2000s. And we had lost a little money in the stock market. And I had a buddy that I was friends with in college since my freshman year. And we'd always stay in contact, even though he was back in Omaha. And I just remember talking to him one day about my third year in the league. I was about to get my second contract. And your second contract is that big contract. That's the one that's supposed to kind of really set you in stone. And so I started talking to him. I said, hey, man, tell me again what you do. And so he started telling me, what he's doing. And I was like, well, why didn't you ever come to me when I was a senior in college? He said, man, I didn't want to impede on our friendship. He's like, I valued our friendship, and I didn't want you to think that I was just being friends just to get your business. And I really appreciate that, because that's far between when you get at this stage, because everybody's about the money. What you can do for them, how much they're going to charge, and that was the opposite. And so the light bulb went off in my head, and so I made that switch, which was probably one of the best decisions I've made. Because the education process started immediately after we signed our second contract. Things that we started talking about was not only the things that will happen the week before or the year, the next year, but we were talking about things 3 to 5 years, 10 years out. How do we set up a legacy? How do we take care of our family? What proper insurances we need, protection, all these different things we started talking about, which I never had with the first guy. And I think when I remember telling him that my goals of what I wanted to accomplish and what we wanted to accomplish after I retired. And I remember when I retired in 2007. It was really the spring of 2008. And I remember later on that year is when the housing market crumbled, which is the worst economy since the Great Depression. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was scared because I just retired, and I know we set a budget, and I didn't, I knew that he always told me everything was going to be fine, but now the rubber meets the road. And there was a little bit of doubt, and I didn't know. But as you look 4 or 5 years past that, how well we did in our finances really was a testament to our relationship and the things that he was telling me and teaching me. Because when the stock market's down, somebody's making money. Somebody's making money, and there's no reason why it couldn't have been us, or minimize the loss if it's a bad economy. And so we did really well, in that period of time, and so that really brought a smile to my face, because it really was a testament to through the good times and through the bad times, we had the right person tell us the right things. And so I didn't have that guy at the first time, but I got the right guy now.
Thank you for that. I was just going to get to that point. Did you have any struggles with relationships when you started making all this money, such as friends or family or anybody else?
Yes and no. On the relationship side, once I started dating my wife now, I knew she was the one. She came from a family of people with sports in life. Her dad was, a high school football coach for 35 years. One brother played college football. Another brother played college wrestling. So sports were in her blood. She was an athlete. So I knew that she was the one. So I didn't really. So once we came out here, we were so far away from our family, it was just us two. So I didn't really get caught up in going to the clubs and to the parties and, all of that kind of that stuff. So from that relationship standpoint, not really. Family, I kind of set the tone early on that everybody had their opportunity to pick what they want to do in life. I chose my path that was best for me. I felt like I was the one that when it was 110 degrees outside and I had to go work out, and that next person's inside, eating ice cream, watching, reruns, that I was sacrificing something. I'd rather pay now than play later. And everybody's got a different philosophy on that. Some people want to play now and work later on, and that's fine. But I wanted to put it in early so that we could do all our other stuff later. And so I set the tone early on with my family members. I'm not the person to just give out cash. I'm not just going to give you a $10,000 check. I believe you have to have skin in the game. And so my dad had an old beat-up truck, and so I got him a truck. My parents didn't own their house, so instead of just giving them money, I paid the rest of their initial house off. So that basically what that did, that freed up cash flow for them. So the money that they were going to have to put in for a mortgage payment, now they could spend themselves. Okay, so
yeah.
I felt like that allowed cash flow was a big thing. Just giving people money didn't really solve anything because usually that would just be blown. And so, so I did those couple of things for my folks. A few years later on, when I got my second contract, they built another house, and I gave them a certain amount towards that house, but I didn't pay for the house. So again, they had to bring money to the table, so they have a skin in the game. Okay, so I felt like I'm helping them out, so I feel good because they have sacrifices, but I'm not putting all my money into it. A lot of times when you buy stuff from somebody, they don't appreciate it as much as you would appreciate it. So if they've got some skin in the game, they take care of it a little bit more. And so that was kind of the philosophy. Now, I've had some other family members. I did something for each family member, like my sister. I helped her with some of her college bills. To me, I felt like that was a good investment. She put the time in to get to school and to pay. So if I paid a small portion of her college, that would be something that was satisfying to her. Did something for my younger brother. And he was on the same path as me. He played 6 years in the National Football League, just retired. But that's a whole other story. But to make a long story short, I did have some outside family members that would come to me time and time again. They still come to me, wanting money for, bills or wanting money for Christmas gifts or whatever have you. I'm not in the business of doing that. But if your lights are going off, your water's going off, then let's sit down and talk about how what's going on. Because me giving you money, if there's a bigger problem that you're, smoking or spending money, gambling, or whatever, then I'm not helping you out. But if we can help bring some people in place to help you get your finances in order, then let's sit and talk. But other than that, it's really off limits because they make their choices, I make my choices, and like I said, if it's an emergency, let's sit down and talk. Other than that, I'm not in the business of just giving money away.
Thank you for that. Since y'all know you had a successful career in the NFL, did you know of any teammates or anybody else in the league that did struggle with their money?
Yes, there's quite a few. Guys that kind of got caught up in the clubs, the fancy cars, the big houses, throwing money around, and in drugs, and those things can chew you up really quick. And there's quite a few guys that have got caught up in that, and it's hurt their relationships, whether it's an immediate relationship or a relationship with a friends or employer. It's something that you can easily get caught up in because when you have money, you become smarter, you become better looking, you become better. Your generosity is more because again, it goes back to if I got a check for $250,000 this week, guess what? I'm getting another one next week and the week after. Now, that's the mindset. So if you go and blow this on all those things we just talked about, well, we can start over and do it again next week. The problem in that pitfall is that at the end of the day, that money's going to run out